Okay, now?
Now it's
Okay.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that you were all able to make it. It's a very snowy day, so we have a small crowd. The adult education team asked the Faith in Action team to do this panel to answer two main questions. One question that we were asked to answer was, looking at the political climate and all of the needs in the world, how personally do you cope with feeling all of the stress of that, feeling all of the weight of that, and still moving forward in life? And the second question is, what can be done? What are the practical things that we can do to address all of the issues going on around us? Where to start? What are the first steps? So each person here, we will have Lois here in a moment too, is going to share briefly how they would answer those two questions. But before they do that, I wanted to just give a little introduction about the Faith in Action Committee. The Faith in Action Committee has several initiatives. So each of the meetings that they have monthly is really focused on each of those initiatives, giving a report on what they have done in the past month and what kinds of upcoming things they have going on. So we have housing justice, environmental justice, Middle East justice and peace, Waging Peace, which is focused on gun violence, migrant ministries, racial justice, the Democracy Discussion Group, United Power for Action and Justice. There's so many layers. There's probably more that I've just missed. This is just from our most recent meeting. And honestly, those meetings are usually one of the best points of my month, because it's so encouraging to have that front row seat to what we're actually doing about all of the chaos in the world, because it can be so easy to get caught up in the what all is going on, and it's heavy. But to see things actually happening, to be involved in things actually happening, just for me is a huge boost. So I'm going to check my notes really quick and make sure I went totally off my notes. So after we've heard from each person on the panel, then we're going to open things up for questions and discussion from all of you. So we're going to start with Tara, the chairperson of the Faith in Action Committee. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Tara, and I wanted to start by thanking the Adult Education Committee for creating this conversation. I really believe that during this time of deep fear and uncertainty, and for many trauma in this country, it feels really important to speak openly about how we're doing emotionally. And also, I hope that opportunities like this help us as a congregation hold each other and enable us to walk with each other during these years. So when I reflected on the question that Marcia posed about coping and strategies, I found that I've been turning to two practices. One is paying attention to the power of language, and the second is, to quote the wise Fred Rogers, finding the helpers. So first, the power of language. I think sometime last year I noticed how my body's physical reaction had changed when simply reading the newspaper or listening to the radio or even looking at podcast titles. I noticed my body tighten, my breath seize, my heart rate change, and I began to pay attention to the language that we were hearing on a daily basis and keeping track of it. So the increased frequency with words like cruelty, danger, evil, hatred, violent, fight, division, crisis, battlefield, trauma, political enemies, assault. And that's just within the United States. That's not including wars and genocide across the oceans. That was just within our country. And the flood of these words, not only did they fuel a sense of hopelessness, but more dangerously, I found myself developing a level of contempt toward the people who I felt were perpetrating the harm, So it was a level of contempt toward other human beings. And it became harder and harder to view all people as children of God. And that created a deep level of spiritual dissonance and a real sorrow for my soul. And I knew that, I began to hunger for an antidote to the dominant cultural language around those words. And so I found myself turning to authors and theologians and poets who were instead grounded in the belief of the divine in every human being, and who wrote purposely about unity. And so I wanted to share some of them with you today. My husband will say our house is littered with piles of books in every room. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I wanted to highlight 3 of them. The first one is Gregory Boyle. You may have heard of him. His probably most popular book is Tattoos on the Heart. And Greg Boyle is a Jesuit priest in Los Angeles who has dedicated his life to working in impoverished communities, but primarily with former gang members who have had a violent history, serious criminal records, and in this book, Cherished Belonging, The Healing Power of Love in Divided Times, he is deeply grounded in 2 unwavering principles: that every person is unshakably good, no exceptions, and we belong to each other, no exceptions. And I wanted to read just some excerpts from this beautiful book. We don't make progress when we demonize. We should abandon that altogether, and in all circumstances, refuse to do it. A mother and a stepfather tortured and killed their young son. A candidate for district attorney said, "They are bad people," and I use the word people lightly. They are nothing short of monsters. Gregory Boyle says, "Surely we can hold something as horrible and still not make monsters of anyone. Demonizing keeps us from solutions. Plus, it's always the opposite of how God sees." The next book is also beautiful. It's Valerie Carr. Her book is See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love. Valerie is an activist and an attorney. She's an Indian American who roots her work on the Sikh faith, which is based on, again, the oneness of humanity. And she did a documentary after 9/11 when she saw on the television screen that the people who were suspected terrorists after 9/11 looked like her father and her uncle and her grandfather, being, men wearing turbans. And she followed acts of hate crimes across the country toward brown and black people. And she interviewed people with racist and xenophobic views. She went to prison and interviewed people who had committed horrible hate crimes. And she was able to write about those interviews. I tried to wonder about this person's story and the possible wound in them. I think of an earnest question, and I try to stay curious long enough to be changed by what I hear. Maybe, just maybe, my opponent will begin to wonder about me in return, ask me questions, and listen to my story. Maybe their views will start to break apart and new horizons will open in the process. Maybe the memory of the exchange will play a critical role in their transformation in the future. Then again, maybe not. It doesn't matter, as long as the primary goal of listening is to deepen my own understanding. Listening does not grant the other side legitimacy, it grants them humanity and preserves our own. And then the final beloved book is The Great Search by John Philip Newell. He's a Scottish theologian, and he looks at the despair and disconnection of the world with Celtic wisdom, and he takes a deep dive into 9 people who he believes through the course of history have met that dissonance, again, with the sacredness of every human being. And the 9 people come from all different religious backgrounds. And the person that's impacted me the most in this book was Etty Hillesum. She was a Dutch Jew who was killed at an extermination camp. And Etty, like Anne Frank, kept a diary. And Etty, like Anne Frank, believed in the goodness of every human being. So I'd like to read an excerpt from this book. This is Etty praying. It is sometimes hard to take in and comprehend, O God, what those created in your likeness do to each other in these disjointed days, she prays. But I no longer shut myself away in my room, God. I try to look things straight in the face, even the worst crimes. The answer, she believes, is not to shut down to the cosmic sadness, as she calls it, that rises deep within her, but to open to it. Give your sorrow all the space and shelter in yourself that it is due. And then a passage later. Just outside her house in Amsterdam, Etty watched a group of German soldiers training in the square. And she prays, God, do not let me dissipate my strength, not the least bit of my strength, on useless hatred against these soldiers. Let me save my strength for better things. The only way to truly fight war, she says, is by releasing each day the love that is shackled inside of us and giving it a chance to live. It's a beautiful book. I spend every morning before I turn on the news or look at my phone to reading a passage or a chapter from one of these books, and that has been my anchor through the day. And so I'll quickly turn to the second practice has been finding the helpers. Fred Rogers said, in the face of despair and great fear, to always look for the helpers. And so you'll find on your chair a handout that lists some of the helpers in Oak Park and in Chicago who are doing that work. They are people that are truly focused on the most marginalized amongst us, and they are providing shelter and food and clothing. And there's something on here for everyone, and I believe if each one of us even do one small thing every week, that we can be the glue that holds us together during these years. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jim Babcock. I'm on the Environmental Justice team here at First United, which, thanks to Lois, joined up with the Faith in Action group several years ago so that we wouldn't be so isolated. It was her suggestion that we come on board, and we did, and have been part of Faith in Action for several years. I believe it was during a Faith in Action meeting on a Tuesday evening in 2016 that in November that we learned that Trump was going to win the presidency, that people were monitoring their phones. And I think sometime in the middle of the meeting, it was announced that he had won Florida, and that was like put him over the edge or whatever. And we sort of went through the meeting, the rest of the meeting, quite quickly, and everybody sort of scattered to get home. There were obviously a lot of emotions that came out during that time, and I sort of want to thank the adult ed group for bringing this subject up. It surprised me that the congregation members, some of them had expressed an interest in wanting to discuss their feelings, their emotions during this time. I know a lot of the conversations, let's say most of the conversations I've had with friends and fellow congregants here have been, pretty milquetoast. Hi, how are you? How's the family? Are you feeling okay? Talk a little bit about politics. But the underlying emotions that are there, and maybe as a man, maybe I think men tend not to express those things as much. That was certainly my practice, was not to express strong feelings openly to very many people at all. And so the chance for this to be brought out, I think, is very important. I think to have these emotions named helps to dissipate the effect that they have, the negative impact that they might have. And so I know that for my work that I was doing for the environment, starting in 2016, there were feelings of sort of being very discouraged. You know, here we've been doing all this work and we know that there's going to be backsliding. And there was sort of a feeling of uselessness. Like here's this somebody in power or administration that's really going to take whatever power we might have been able to gain out of our hands. But it was interesting that shortly after the election, and I don't even know if he had been inaugurated yet, there was a large environmental conference downtown. Several national organizations, a lot of local people here went, including from Planet Green, which is a very active group here in Oak Park. They started the conversation out, the moderator started I know you might be feeling discouraged, but this is a great opportunity for us to concentrate on local action, local initiatives, local advocacy. You know, the federal level, maybe, you know, we've lost out for a while, but we can really do a lot now. We can focus on local initiatives, and that's what we did. We started looking at community solar, rooftop solar, different programs that could be initiated to help with the climate crisis, which was pretty much the main focus of environmental work and has been since that time, in my opinion. And so that was sort of our viewpoint then, to try to counteract the emotions, the negative emotions. When he got elected the second time, there were, for me, heightened emotions: anger, frustration, depression, fear. When he initiated or helped with the bombing of Iran, I thought, okay, here we go. This is going to be another lengthy, fruitless war, and seemingly nothing we can do about it. And I was fearful because many of you know I have family in the Middle East. And they were reporting seeing these missiles on their terrace. They were in between the two countries. They were reporting seeing these missiles going across the sky. And that was like not a good feeling. And regarding the climate, the whole idea of climate anxiety has become a thing, has become openly recognized. I've been in meetings where, you know, we've been discussing the very negative effects of climate degradation, and people have broke down crying. And some people have said, I can't do this anymore, I just can't deal with this anymore. And they'll leave the organization or whatever. The youth, there were Oak Park youth and local youth that went to the International Climate Conference last year, the COP29, which has tens of thousands of people that attend from all over the world and try to get a consensus agreement to what should be done around the climate. And it's been very ineffective, pretty much, for 30 years. But last year, they had gone a couple years in a row and they were able to get on a panel, and the panel was about climate anxiety among the youth. And so they had a whole panel that discussed this from, you know, youth from all around the world, and they expressed their anxiety about my future is looking very dim, basically, is what they were saying. I don't have much of a future. I don't see a future. And that's a very disturbing thought, I think. As a parent, I know I was feeling that, you know, my kids would not be very well off, or my grandchildren. But then at a certain point, I started feeling, I'm not going to be that well off. This is starting to affect me. This is affecting us right now, climate change. Maybe in the Midwest, we're pretty well protected, but certainly in other parts of the country and around the world, they're feeling big effects. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people being displaced by floods, wildfires. You know, where are those people going to go as these as these events keep increasing. So, you know, a lot of trepidation over the change that's happened with the administration, where it seems like it's moved from being sort of a bumbling, ineffective, populist government to being a really full-blown, organized, fascist-directed organization with an agenda that comes from that Project 2025, and really has gone full bore with that project, and we see the results. In the face of that, what do you do? And I've thought ever since even 2016 or before, there were several things, and most of them had to do with taking action, being active in some way. I've been more or less an academic person, you know, my whole life, you know, studying things, reading about things, learning about them. But probably 20 years ago or so, I was with the Sierra Club, and I had an opportunity. They had a website that talked about a program called Cool Cities that was going to get municipalities to try to reduce their carbon footprint. And they had organization in each town, and they had one in Elmhurst where I lived at the time. And they had a little button on there that said, if you want to take action, click here. And I had to think about it for a while. Okay, I'll take the jump. And that really changed a lot. I was able to start working with people that I really liked. We had common interests, common bonds. It just made me feel better all around. And very similar things that are happening now here, obviously, with the Faith in Action group. You would think with all the issues that are being dealt with, homelessness, hunger, poverty, gang violence, all these things would be very depressing. But actually I find our meetings to be very uplifting and happy almost, that, oh, we're getting some things done. And that's sort of what I wanted to say here today, to encourage people that if you're not already active in some group or thinking about it, you know, start edging your way into it, because it really helps with the mental condition. One of the organizations that our team works with is Interfaith Green Network, and part of their mission talks about amplifying our collective voices. So working together is also not good for internal emotions, but it also has an effect on how effective is your work. If you're working with 10 people instead of by yourself, obviously, you know, you can have more effect. So the advocacy that we do, the education that we do, you know, all the different things that we do has an effect, as opposed to, you know, just working by ourselves. So I have some things on the table over there if you want to take a look at and just see what our team is doing. Some of the community solar I've talked about a few times. And thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Pedro Garcia. I'm a new member in the church. I've been coming for a while, but I'm a new member. About the question how to cope. The morning after Trump was elected, I found my 70-year-old daughter crying. And it really touched my heart, because you know, she's kind of very optimistic person, but to see her crying brought to me the question, what can I do about this? I mean, what is within my power to do? I am not a very fond person of Paul, the writer in the New Testament. As a great person, he doesn't have sometimes the best passages to say. As a father of the daughter, he also lacks some sensitivity with women. But I also thought this is the situation that the first Christians had to deal with. I mean, it's not new to our tradition to deal with oppression, to deal with persecution, to deal with hopeless. And that brought me into a sense of history, and a sense that what I can do is what my ancestors did in many, many situations. Even Jesus was living in a time of tremendous oppression. Then, and the second thing is, I am a psychologist by training, and I can be in my head a lot. But usually it doesn't bring me to a good place to be in my head a lot. I think that it's important to think over things, to reflect, and to have a kind of cognitive awareness. But for me, what helps me is to do something. Honestly, it gives me hope to do something. And for a few years, I've been doing things in the area of migrant and refugees. At one time, I was a volunteer with the Kapler Center, that is an organization part of the Heartland Alliance, dealing with victims of torture. And it sounds so heavy, but the person that I was helping gave me tremendous hope. Because to see that person coping, to see that person moving, to see that person kind of being thankful about what she had, gave me tremendous hope. Now I am in Heartland Alliance also dealing with refugees that just arrived to the United States, and they need support. The support that I am giving to this family is mainly to help them, believe it or not, to learn English, even if English is my third language almost. And I meet with them online twice a week. And you know, we practice English, and I teach for an hour to the father. And one of the things that happened at one time, Tara knows, is that they were at the point of being homeless. They couldn't find housing because they don't have a credit report. Then I talked to my husband. I said, you know, I cannot see this family on the streets. They are the two of them, plus 5 children, 2 babies. Then we decided, or I decided, and he approved, to co-sign the release. And that is another situation that came, you know, and gave me hope, because now this family is thriving. The other area that I am working is with unaccompanied minors in the United States. This is an organization called the Young Center for Immigrant Children's Rights. You have it there. And what we do is these young men and women, they are here without parents, without family, and they are in the process of being given either legal status in the country or being brought back to their country. And what we do is to visit them once a week, and just to be the anchor person, the person that they can count on every single week. Then these are two examples of what you can do, and I think that we have to open to questions when I pass it to Lois.
Yes, I am Lois Love, and I'm going to talk about both the housing justice and waging peace. But first, just to talk about my response to our current situation is
Lois, a bit louder, please.
very overwhelming. I get very overwhelmed, close to tears at some of that when you hear the decisions that are being made and removing supports for people that currently keep them safe. And so I think one of the things that does really help me be able to keep going forward is to understand that we can't put all our energy into fighting, into pushing back. We need to be working on the world that we want to be and promoting the world that we want to see. And I do find working in these areas of housing justice and waging peace, working with gun violence prevention, is working, like we were saying, on the local level. We can make a difference in those areas, and that feels encouraging. So in housing justice, many of you are acquainted with the fact that we work with Housing Forward, and in our work here at the church, our goal is to engage the church in being a part of working with our partners. And we've done that in the particular areas like the House to Home kits, where when families that have worked with Housing Forward, they come from homelessness, and but they are ready to move into stable housing in an apartment. These kits go with them to provide all of the household needs, towels, kitchen supplies, and those kinds of things. And they move in, and they are ready to go and live as a family in that location. That's very encouraging. It's a small step, and we do it as a community. You can buy wooden spoons and be a part of this project, which is important. And we chose Housing Forward and New Moms because when we started looking at homelessness, and it was coming out of a time where we were talking about moving from charity to changing structures and looking within our local area, within 3 miles. We found that both Housing Forward and New Moms have track records of success, of helping to move people out of the critical area of need and helping them to make changes in their lives, being partners as they move into a stable lifestyle, being able to support themselves and care for their families. So the initiative here at church, you probably become aware of in the spring, we have been pushing, contribute to Loving with Books, because New Moms deals with young women who have a child, but the options for housing are minimal, and their track record for successful economic support for themselves and the family is very low. If you have a child when you're very young and haven't completed education and other things. So in our efforts around the Loving with Books, we are contributing to taking books for children. Every time there's a home visit or a program participation, they get books for their children for them to share. And that nurtures and helps support the families to be strong and nurturing. organizations have many opportunities for you to do something that make a difference. And other things we do for Housing Forward and in the community are meals. Every third and fifth Monday of the month throughout the year, people from First United are making lunch and taking them over to the interim housing program for 40 people. And during the school year, it's mostly the church school who does it, but other times of the year, individuals purchase and prepare lunch and take it over. And now Lydia is leading a supper club once a month where people get together and cook a meal and take it over to the emergency housing. In addition to that, you can look and find other ways to volunteer. I know there's volunteers over at sorry,
You didn't
the
interim?
example. What?
The interim housing?
No, I'm thinking of the secondhand store over here.
Oh, Economy Shop.
The Economy Shop, right. So, and I know Deb Strackos staffed the desk at New Moms, doing things like that aren't extremely stressful or difficult, but you make a difference, and it's helping to create the growth for people facing these problems. It's helping to make a difference in each step in doing that. So, the other thing, of course, I'm involved in is our Wage and Peace team. And our goal there is to engage this congregation to be aware of and make a difference in the area of gun violence prevention. And it's a type of thing we feel like maybe we can't make a difference. What can I do that will be a difference? But people here, as you work in this community of finding what makes a difference, that are a number of opportunities. One of the main and a very effective action that we can take is to talk with our families, people who may own a gun. If you're sending a child or a teenager to babysit at a new home, just checking, do you happen to have guns in your home? How are they stored? If you own a gun, keeping it secure. The safe storage movement has been growing, but, and I just heard a report from a survey of gun owners. 80% of them will store their guns safely, but another 20% may have all their guns except for one that isn't stored. But because the whole realm of guns becoming very popular to have right now, that the exposure to an available gun that children can access, or a stranger, or a thief, puts a lot of risk in our society. So this emphasis on safe storage, just having a conversation with people, it's easy to do. There's samples over there of how affordable it can be as an instrument. And other things you could do is be a part of the community. Tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, we're honoring and remembering the victims of gun violence and supporting the survivor families in a vigil at St. Edmunds. And we welcome everyone to come to that vigil.
Thank you, Lois. So I forgot to introduce myself, by the way. I'm Jamie. I'm on council and I'm the liaison to both Faith in Action and Adult Ed, which put me in the natural position of being the host for this morning. So thank you all for the information, the heartfelt guidance. This is all really good. I really appreciate that Tara brought up the idea of what Fred Rogers said of looking for the helpers, and that if it was an answer to, with children, when children are seeing these horrific things on the news, how do you address it with them? You address it with them by pointing out, like, yes, this tragedy occurred. Look at the firefighters that are helping, or look at the paramedics that are helping, right? And that's definitely something that can apply to adults as well. When we see the people that are helping, it can be so encouraging. But I for myself, take that a step further to be the helper, which I think has been echoed with everybody here, that as helpful as it is to see people doing things to combat the evil in our world, it is so much more powerful to be that person who's doing that little bit to combat it. And I think a big part of that is to not feel like you need to be the superhero to solve all of it, but to be the helper. And sometimes it can feel like what I'm doing is just a drop in the bucket, and how much I'm putting so much effort in, and it's nothing, right? But how does a bucket get filled? It gets filled by drop after drop after drop after drop after drop. All of the drops from all of the people that are here in our community collectively is what fills this bucket towards justice. So one thing that I do is I'm connected to a lot of groups that are constantly talking about needs in the community, whether it's immigrants or housing justice, food justice. I'm on the Beyond Hunger email list for volunteers, things like that. And 99% of the needs that come through in those email lists or chat groups or whatever are things that I look at and I can't do that. I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the skills, whatever. But every once in a while, something pops up that I'm like, oh, that I can do. And so I jump in and I do that one thing. And again, it can feel like it's just a drop in the bucket, but I would really encourage everybody to find what are the things that really tug at your heart that you're passionate about, and find the little ways that you can jump in, or the big ways, but start with the little ways that you can jump in. And this sheet that was on your chairs, thank you so much, Tara, for putting it all together. It has an abundance of ways to connect with the community. So there's community fridges all over Oak Park and Forest Park. And some people, when they do their regular grocery shopping, they buy double of some items and swing by the community fridge on their way home and drop off some of it. These fridges are just open to the public. There's no income guidelines. There's no limits on how often you can go. If you're in need of food, there is food there. So the list of those addresses are at the top of this paper. There's information here about the Oak Park Migrant Ministry, the Boulevard Free Store, organizations working to advocate for and provide services to immigrants. This has been a really big one lately. The first one listed, ICIRR, Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. If you've heard about people in the community who are doing the whistles and alerting their neighbors if there's ICE activity in their area, that is all being organized by ICIRR. They have training, they have groups you can connect with so you can be notified of that. Housing Forward and Beyond Hunger, of course, I think anybody in our church knows a lot about those two because we do a lot with them. There's so many ways to get involved. Guiding Light of Hope is working with people at the Blue Line Station, and the People's Lobby is a grassroots advocacy for inclusive public policies. And we have 3 people in our church who are actively engaged with that. Kate Redling, Pete Todd, and Ruth Macbeth. And I just want to read a description that Ruth sent me. The People's Lobby engages in grassroots advocacy, organizing and lobbying at the state and local level to create effective, inclusive public policies for all people, including working people, the disabled, and others often overlooked by government systems. They are currently working for healthcare with dignity for everyone in Illinois and green public transit. The People's Lobby believe that your political home is the place where you advocate for the change that you want. First United has 3 members who have joined the People's Lobby. Kate Redling is the board chair and founder of the Healthcare Network, and Pete Todd and Ruth Macbeth both joined the People's Lobby this year. So you could talk to any one of them or go to the website that's listed here for more information. And they have a training, I believe it was an online training, right, that Pete was talking about, that is about defeating fascism. And
It's in person.
it is in person. Okay, thank you, Ruth.
It's 2-hour session.
Two sessions, okay. And it's about defeating fascism and learning more about what exactly is going on and how do we combat that. So I encourage you to look through this paper, talk with the people around you that you know are involved, and find ways to jump in. We are almost out of time, but we're going to take a few minutes for some questions. So Marcia has a microphone. If you have any questions for anybody on the panel, we can take those now.
Thank you for your remarks. I really take them to heart. Tara, you were talking about physical feelings of anxiety and fear. I got those when the federal agents were coming to town to take away the people who appeared to be Hispanic. And the postseason baseball was going on at the same time. And although I don't always know what's going on with sports. And so I was thinking about the immigrants and what was happening to them in Broadview. And I said to my husband, well, we don't have to think about that tonight. And he said, that's right, the World Series is on. So that turned into being like a very good coping thing for me for the 2 weeks that the World Series took place. And if you guys wanted to talk a little bit about what you do to gain energy to go back to the fight.
I love it. Again, like the somatic response to this administration, I don't think it can be understated. We've all heard the helicopters above, like the month of October. That was a cortisol-raising month to have the presence of helicopters. And even just, the whistling and honking, like it felt like we were kind of entering a war zone here at Oak Park in Chicago. And so I feel like it does take a lot of like mindfulness and self-care of our bodies during that time. I guess I would throw out like a yoga practice or anything, again, where you are really, really paying attention to your body and your breathing feels very important. I guess a lot of these authors also say, especially this other Bittersweets, Susan Cain, she talks about how important it is to pay attention to beauty and joy in the midst of trauma, which might seem, like cognitive dissonance to do that, or that you're not paying attention to what's happening, but I do feel like that's very important. So whatever, again, brings you joy, if it's music, usually for me it's gardening, which is not happening right now, but anything, I think especially where you can touch the earth, and walking is the best way to do that, for grounding. Does anyone else want to jump in?
What I do is mindfulness. I follow a particular practice that is called mindfulness and self-compassion. And then I just take 10 minutes every day, to check myself and to find, how my body is feeling, how my mind is feeling. And that helps me.
Yeah, I actually cut some of my remarks short in paying attention to the time, but I'm going to read it now because it addresses that. So I've had the unfortunate experience of having to flee domestic violence, and there are a lot of parallels to what is going on overall right now and what was going on for me individual in that time. If you consider how stressful and traumatic it is to flee domestic violence, give yourself that same compassion, because we are, as a country, are fighting and fleeing the fascism, and it is so similar. So if you think about, like, if you knew somebody who was going through something that severe, you would give them the grace that, like, it's okay to check out and watch the World Series or watch a movie or whatever it is that just makes you feel good. Those are really important things to be allowing ourselves to do, to be realizing how important it is to have that self-care. When somebody is fleeing domestic violence, on average it takes 7 times of trying to leave before they're able to actually effectively get out of that situation. And in that, again, a parallel, there's a lot of trying things that feel like failures. It feels like, what am I even doing? Is this even making a difference? But it's actually laying the groundwork for the eventual success. As the days drag on, normal things like eating or watching a movie can feel really meaningless compared to this big monster that you're fighting. But it's those everyday activities that keep us grounded in our life and keep us focused on what we're here for, to love our neighbors, to love our families, to love our communities. Sometimes there's choices that feel impossible to make. Choosing the least bad option can still bring a lot of pain and heartache. So taking one day at a time, one step at a time, sometimes not even knowing if you're moving in the right direction. It can be heavy and hard and confusing, but the key to remember, for me anyway, is you keep going. Even when it's hard, even when you don't really know that, like, the steps that I'm taking right now, are these the right steps? Are they gonna help? And a big piece of it is, again, acknowledging the pain, acknowledging the trauma, acknowledging that we are going through a collective traumatic experience, and that is going to impact us, and we have to give ourselves grace in that. So for me, the best way to cope is to just keep showing up. Every day, the things that I value, truth and justice and peace, and whatever little things I can do to keep doing that. And again, it's that drop in the bucket. Every person is just another drop, drop, drop to fill that bucket up. So, does anybody else have anything to add? We are coming down to the end of our time.
We have time for another question. Did you have something, Marcia? No.
Well, I just my response is, the projects I'm involved with can take the majority of my time, but I realize I have to make space to be able to say no and choose relationship over being busy and getting something down off your list.
Marcia, I do have one thing to add. One suggestion is to get outside of our own orbit, and I recommend hosting a dinner party is a good way to do that. Invite 8 people to your home and make it a party. Another idea is to join yet another book club. Get out of your own head into a world of an author's story, and then connect with people. So just more social engagement. Thank you.
I'm going to say one quick thing too. I don't know if anybody else is as addicted to Rachel Maddow's show as I am, but I record it and watch it and really respect her ability to interview people and solicit good information. She brought in a woman who was in a rock group in Russia that had been jailed for their opposition to Putin, and they are still under threat, and they're currently in the United States. But she and this rock group have been very much activist against fascism and sort of pointing out the dangers that we are reeling in that direction in the United States. And Rachel asked her, is there something, if you could go back and do it again, is there something you could have done that might put you in a better position, or have put you in a better position? And she said, I wish we had been more open to talk to people who didn't see it our way. So we're not going to convince everyone, but if there are people that are questioning but sort of leaning in the other direction, but if you can have discussions with them, some of those people may join your side of things, and some of those people may be contributing to fixing the problem. So I would encourage people in the United States to take the time to do that. So rather than putting up the fence. So thank you all very much. Quick thing, next week, please come. Please bring your children, your grandchildren. This is not just for little ones. We are having cocoa coffee and carols. We have some musicians from First United Church who are going to be here leading us in carols. Very informal, no program other than just having fun, enjoying the holiday, and it's for children of all ages. Thank you so much.
Thank you.